Hey everyone, welcome to a special summer bonus episode of the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast, where I interview the coffee professionals of the West Coast and try to help get us all a little coffee smarter in the process. Today's guest is Joe Bettinger. He was on the show with the team from Marea Coffee in Season 1, but I wanted to talk to him again about his other career as a coffee broker with Cape Horn Coffee Incorporated. Cape Horn Coffee, you may have noticed, has generously supported this show, and I'm excited to talk to Joe about what he does as an importer and a salesman of good coffee. He essentially is choosing coffee to bring into the United States and representing the farmers at origin. This is a summer episode, however, and for the first time in a very long time, I'm recording a show outside the confines of my closet studio. I'm in Wisconsin visiting my parents for the first time since the pandemic, and I have to admit, my coffees have tasted just a little bit sweeter because of it. In a bit of a coincidence, Joe is also here in Wisconsin this week, so we had a lot to chat about, including humidity, housing costs, and of course, coffee. If you want to multitask while listening to the show today, go follow at Roast West Coast on Instagram, or give the newsletter a follow at roastwestcoast.com. The social feeds have been sluggish this summer, but I'll be locking in as we get closer to Season 3 of the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast coming this fall. Right now, I hope your coffee mug is full, because it is time for a bonus Roast West Coast coffee interview with Joe Bettinger, coffee broker at Cape Horn Coffee Incorporated.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry.
Well, you know what? With that, I'm going to say, Mr. Bettinger, welcome back to the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast.
Thank you.
You were on the show already, Season 1. You're a coffee guy. You're roasting and creating coffee for Marea Coffee. But you also work with Cape Horn Coffee Brokers, Cape Horn Coffee Incorporated. And I wanted to learn more about that from you today.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, starting with what is a green coffee broker or coffee importer, and how do you fit into that chain between that coffee plant in the ground and the cup of coffee I'm having in the morning?
Yeah, definitely. So we're green coffee importers. So we actually make the connection to the producers, the farmers at origin. And in order to get the coffee, you actually have to have an exporter at origin, and then you also need an importer. So we have, and some people do both. Some of the larger multinational guys are exporters and importers. And so basically an importer just bridges the chain. We are the ones that bring the coffee from origin, get it on the boat or however it might be coming in. And really it's kind of knowing that logistical and taking the risk financially. It's because, a lot of, roasters are like, oh, okay, we can do this. And then they find out, oh, well, there's a little more to it than I thought. There's just a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And so that's what an importer does. They bring the coffee in. You have to have funding for that. You're talking about a container, which is, let's take Brazil, a 320 bags at 132 pounds. So that's 42,000 pounds of coffee at several dollars. So you have to be capitalized and be able to put that money out there, because when you buy the coffee from origin, you pay once it gets loaded, once it leaves. There's no, or sometimes sooner, depending on what type of arrangement you have. So you have to finance that for the 30 or 60 days that it's on the water. And then it arrives, it comes in the warehouse. And then it's also all the logistics getting it from the warehouse to the coffee roaster, which has been an absolute nightmare this year so far. What they call LTL, less than truckload, which are putting the coffee bags on the pallets. That's how most roasters receive the coffee. That whole world's been turned upside down for so many reasons. There's a shortage of drivers, gas, warehousing, all these factors from COVID and just not moving around. And now everything's moving again. It's just been very, very difficult. And now at origin, what we're facing is there's a shortage of containers and getting the coffee out is backed up, bringing it in, there's ships sitting out waiting to come in. So the whole supply chain is just right now turned on its end. And so you just got to be patient and work through it. And, that's really all you can do, because so much of this stuff is out of our control. I can't control so many of these things from origin and other companies. And so it's unfortunate, but we just have to work through it.
You said something a few minutes ago that I don't know why I didn't think about this, but you said you have to sit and wait for 30 to 60 days while the coffee's on the water. And I think I'm so used to the idea of Amazon Prime that I just was like, oh, well, we place the order and then it's there in a couple of days, or next day. And that's just not the reality. It's just kind of this waiting period where it's left a port somewhere, but it still hasn't gotten to you, but you're on the hook for it.
Exactly. And you don't know, the insurance you have to have, and the outlay of cash and capital is pretty extensive when you're moving a lot of coffee. So that is a big factor of it. And being able to take the risk from knowing your suppliers at origin and that whole deal. If you're dealing with people you haven't dealt with before, that's why the whole part of the process, we get what's called a pre-shipment sample. So they will actually send a small sample that we cup and we try, and then they ship the coffee, and then the coffee arrives, and we have to match that pre-shipment to what actually arrives. Because a lot of times what you got for the pre-shipment isn't exactly what you receive. So that's another factor of risk that's layered on, as like if you're a roaster looking, oh, well, I'll import this, I'll bring this in. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? What do you have in place in case that happens? So it's kind of a world where you have to have those relationships and you build those over time.
Yeah, it sounds like there has to be a little bit of faith between the two of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where it really comes into the way I view it is the guys at origin and the producers and farmers, they're our partners in this business, in this supply chain. So I value them. I look at them as my business partner, and I'm almost like their importer. I sell their coffee. We're in business. So I want them to make money. I want them to be profitable. I don't want to beat them up for a price, because they need to make a living. They need to be sustainable and be able to have their employees and continue to produce. Or like what you might see is the market's up now, which we'll talk about later. But, at some point, these guys will stop producing coffee because they're losing money and they can't sustain. So it's the whole wheel. You have to, everyone along the supply chain needs to be able to survive, or else then you're going to have guys doing other stuff and there will be less coffee supply, and then the price will really go up. So there's that big factor of having these relationships and traveling down there and getting to know these guys and partnering with them. And that's my favorite part, really, is going to origin, being down there, being with these guys, because they're awesome. They're great people. It's just such a cool experience. And that's something, hopefully in the next year, we'll get you down to origin and take you on a trip down there, and you'll see the whole process. And that's what I encourage all roasters and everyone in the coffee industry, get down there and see everything that's going on and see how hard everyone works, and the appreciation that you have. Not that people don't appreciate it, but it's so different when you see guys on the side of a mountain, that's like this, and they're going through each tree picking the cherries, and it's just amazing, and all the work that's done and the process and everything that goes into the production of the coffee to get it here is amazing. The milling, the processes, and really it's, someone told me a long time ago, farming coffee is what, how does it go? Farming coffee is like being married, and doing other crops is like your girlfriend. So you're committed when you're putting in the coffee farm. It takes a few years to get those plants going, and it's not like you can just change out like sugarcane or some of the other crops you can change out year to year. It's a commitment. So
you've been with Cape Horn for a while. Cape Horn's been doing this since 1995, which feels like 5 years ago, but it's actually 25 years ago. And how long have you been doing this as a broker?
I've been, I would say probably about, I believe 7 or 8 years now. So,
Okay. And how did you fall into that?
well, I was in real estate development and finance and marketing for 15 years. Started in venture capital, raising money for small companies, and was in a totally different world. And I was just a little, I was a little burned out on that whole world. And these guys I knew had an import company, and they're like, "Hey, why don't you come? Why don't you come work with us?" And I'm like, "All right, I mean, I can always go back and do something boring and that I don't like." So yeah, I kind of just jumped in head first and started cold calling roasters and trying to get customers and learn the business. And so I started like I didn't know. The only thing I knew is like I liked coffee, and I liked the process of having something tangible, growing something, business, and kind of the whole model. I like to work with people that run their own business. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, so it just seemed like, yeah, we'll give this a shot and see what happens. So the industry is great. That's one thing about coffee is I've just met so many good, nice people. It's a great industry, and it's fun to work in. And when you go to the big SCA and the big trade shows, it's a lot of fun, and you see people and you get to travel. And so that was the other thing too. I was like, well, I'll get to go down to Origin, where there's good surf all around the world. All the coffee areas have great surfing. So, okay.
At Cape Horn, I noticed when I was looking through the website that you get coffee from all over the world, but you kind of focus on Central America and Brazil. Why those two regions in particular?
So one of the partners of Cape Horn, Daniel Neves, he is from Brazil, and his family, he grew up as a farmer. His family has farms down there. They still do. We import all of his family's coffee. So that's why the Brazil we've been. And back in when Paul Layton started Cape Horn back in 1995, he was the former SCA president, and he was a roaster, actually. He started as up in Oregon for years. And then he was a broker that mainly dealt in Brazilian coffees. So that's how he got connected to Danny and his family. And then, so that's the focus, and just having all that expertise out of Brazil and farms there, which is a little unique for an importer to actually have that direct connection to family farms and things like that, which gives us a different perspective, I think, which I like, really focused on the producer and understanding all that goes into that. And then Central America as well, just being right there. And we've just had for years so many connections down there. It's easier, I should say, to get the coffee up there than other areas. And we do Africa and Asia and things like that. But it's almost like the way coffee and importing used to be is, think of it like the globe is, and everything's kind of vertical. So all of America would get their coffee from Central and South America. Europe would primarily be Africa. And then the Asia would be, Southeast Asia and Australia. So it was kind of zoned like that before the time, when you would have a lot of ocean freight and things like that.
So once you get that coffee here, you've dealt with getting it out of origin. It's on a boat. It lands here. And I'm going to say San Diego, even though I know you're in Wisconsin today. What happens then? Do you already have that coffee pre-sold to coffee roasters? Are you going out and pitching it to roasters? I mean, how does that work?
A little bit of both. We definitely try to pre-sell as much coffee. That's the goal. But we make commitments, and that's part of the relationship with the producer at Origin, is being able to make commitments to them. That's a big deal, being able to say, hey, I'm not in this for the short run. I'm going to be able to commit to you this year, next year, and pay you a price that you can operate with. And so doing that, we don't always have it all pre-sold. We try to pre-sell as much as possible, but you always need coffee to get new customers and to have on what they call the spot, which is spot. It's called spot coffee. That's coffee that's in a warehouse that's already here that has not been sold yet. So you'll have that, but that's the goal, is to get roasters familiar with the various farms we work with, and a year in and year out, and develop those relationships so we can make those commitments to people at origin. And then from there, you bring in the coffee and it goes into the warehouse. And coffee's a little bit different. Some importers have their own warehouses, but a lot of people share the same coffee warehouse in different locations. And it's a separate company that runs the warehouse. The best way I can describe it, and this will definitely date myself, is at the end of Indiana Jones, the first one, where they store the Ark in that warehouse. That's kind of how big the coffee warehouse is. So you essentially have all importers bring their coffees into these warehouses all around the country. And that way that you can trade with other importers and share inventory and sell to other importers. And then you can also, it's easier to palletize and ship coffee out and do it that way. So it's a little bit different, I think, than a lot of industries.
Yeah, there's just so many logistical I don't want to say challenges. It's kind of exciting to think about all the different things that have to get done, but so many specialties, the company that has figured out how to warehouse and put it on a pallet, the company that's figured out how to get it out of the country, or has those relationships, or the company on the side that's connecting with the roasters. You mentioned the coffee price earlier. You've been working this industry for a while now. The coffee price in general is just really basic, is essentially the per pound price that we're paying for coffee at the wholesale level, right?
That's correct. And coffee is a commodity, so it's tied to, just like any other commodities, soybeans, metals, things like that. It's tied to the market. And that isn't always relative to the cost of production. It's really just people buying futures, different things like that. So it's not always where it should be technically, but it's a market,
Let me interrupt just to clarify. It's not straight supply and demand. You have this other, it's supply and demand plus this other kind of overarching concept of which people are predicting what the supply and demand will be and purchasing based on that.
Yes. And not only that, you have people, the coffee market will move based on the stock market when people are moving money in and out, or people want to move their money into a commodity. So supply and demand could not change at all, but just because hedge funds are moving their money here, they want to, they think the market's going to drop. So they want to pull, when you see a big sell off, they'll put it into a commodity because it's thought to be a little more stable sometimes. So there's so many different factors with the economy. We saw back when the last stimulus, when Obama did everything, we saw the coffee market move because of that. So there's so many, it's crazy how many different factors that go into deciding like how that moves. Now, recently in the last week, a lot of it was from the coffee freeze in Brazil. That kind of notched the market up. So, but this is the biggest increase that I've seen since I've been in this short of amount of time. I mean, it's up 50 cents a pound, which when you're talking about roasted coffee, that doesn't seem like that much, but in the wholesale and green coffee world, that's a lot. But as it relates to specialty coffee, which is a lot of the stuff that guys you've been interviewing, it won't make as big a difference just because a lot of the coffee that's sold in the specialty is sold on a flat price because it's higher quality and it's not more commercial quality. But you will definitely see increases in the specialty coffee costs.
As somebody who has relationships through your company and because of your visits to origin, to farms and the people that are creating this product, and relationships here with the roasters, how do you feel the coffee price is a fair representation of what it should be? And the second part of that question, and maybe it should be the first, is when you mentioned the stimulus under Obama, how does today's news, how long does it take to reflect in that coffee price? What's happening in the economy today?
Oh, it's like the stock market. It's pretty instantaneous. It'll hours. It will trigger and people will, and I don't know exactly how all of it's traded, but I think it's similar, like there's some computer stuff going on or some algorithms. So sometimes when something gets triggered, it just keeps it rolling until someone puts the brakes on a little bit. But yeah, it's pretty instantaneously, just like the stock market, I would say, reflecting on even things that haven't happened yet, possibly. You could see changes that way. But that's why, what we do with a lot of the roasters is we try to actually book out their coffee, and we try to say, hey, let's go ahead and figure out what you're going to need for the year, and let's lock that in so you're not susceptible to changes in the market.
I am assuming you've done quite a bit of traveling, which we've kind of referenced, but are there any adventures that you've had that would be, worth telling, or is it all business hotels and happy hours?
Oh yeah, no, it's all of them. I mean, you're climbing mountains, you're in the back. I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but I drove from in Nicaragua from the very north to Jinotega, about two hours in the back of a truck, holding on, standing up, and just crazy. Yeah, all kinds of crazy stuff. But it's just so cool because you're out there. You're literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you're 8 hours away from a city when you get out there on some of these farms, and the roads are. You have to have a 4-wheel drive, and it's just you're on. But when you get out there, you're on top of a mountain, and it's so beautiful there. So yeah, a lot of great stories like that. And when you get to go there and travel and see how beautiful these places and areas are, and you work with some of the guys at Origin, and they're like, hey, I'm gonna build you a house on top of this mountain so you can come visit me. And you're like, cool, man, right on. So you really do develop those friendships and relationships to people, and that's what that's really what drives you. And I would do that part of it and just buy the coffee, but there's a whole nother side of it, right? Like, it's easy to buy coffee, but someone has to represent those guys and get their coffee out and sell the coffee here and keep that whole wheel going year to year. So that's the exciting part too, because being able to introduce to roasters some of these farms and people and coffees. Like one in particular is one of my guys in Guatemala makes a orange peel process. I think I might have sent you a sample, but it's actually orange peel fermentation, and they're just doing so many. I mean, I feel like coffee's been around for so long, but there's so many things in its infancy, what these guys are doing and experimentation and different things like that with all the processes. And they can't do too much because you don't want to risk it could turn out bad when you're doing these fermentations. So they have to be real careful with that. But they are doing a lot of real interesting stuff. So it's exciting.
You're on that front line to see that innovation before the rest of us. So I envy you.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to thank you for being here for one, and I'm looking forward to our next chat and a cup of coffee in real life. I want to know, is there anything about Cape Horn Coffee in particular as a broker and as a company that you want people to know about? I feel like even though I love coffee and I've been interviewing all these coffee roasters, you're like the only broker that I know and that I've talked to. So is there anything that just general knowledge people should know about the brokerage?
I would say that's the other partner is Mark Williams, and he ran the coffee book for the coffee. There's a coffee bank, Brown Brothers Foreman, up on the East Coast. It's either in Boston or New York. I can't remember, but he ran the coffee book for them. So he's Cape Horn CFO and president, I believe. So it's just a very well balanced. So you have a financier, a banker, you have a farmer. It's a very good combination, I would say. We're not a huge multinational corporation. We're like a lot of the roasters I deal with in the importer world. We're a small company. We have, I think, 6 employees, but we do those guys do a lot of containers and a lot of volume, but we know what it's like, and we work with our guys. We know what it's like to be a small business. We do a lot of stuff with terms and and working with guys, so that we're definitely different than your bigger companies like that, because we understand what it is to be a small business and a small roaster, small to medium size. We're just trying to help those guys out and help their businesses out and bring them the best coffee we can find.
Well, I think that's a really unique thing. And for anyone who's listening, I'll add links to some of the coffee roasters around town that you can find coffee that came through Cape Horn Coffee Roasters. Joe, I really appreciate you being here. Congratulations. I know that you had a big move recently, and I'm excited to see what happens next for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I will be I'll be back on the West Coast a lot. I've got a lot of clients out there. So we'll have a cup of coffee next time I come into town.
Sounds good. Maybe a little whiskey and a coffee too later on.
Yeah, there you go. Sounds great.
Hey everybody, thank you for listening to the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast. It is summertime, but I am already brainstorming ideas for Season 3. If you've been enjoying this program, please consider leaving a tip or choose the paid monthly newsletter subscription when you sign up at roastwestcoast.com. Your support really helps grow this show and allows us to continue bringing you this coffee content. Subscribe on roastwestcoast.com or on the Anchor Podcast homepage. Every time I see a new subscriber, it's just a little bit more motivation to bring you the very best coffee content on the West Coast. And now, back to the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast. A big thank you to Joe for taking some time out of his summer to hang out and talk coffee with me. He's always hooked me up with some great coffee samples from Cape Horn Coffee Incorporated and from Marea Coffee, which I never take for granted. That is the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast for today. Thank you for listening. Season 3 will be out this fall, and if you've got coffee questions, please feel free to reach out through roastwestcoast.com or on social media at roastwestcoast. As always, thank you for sharing this show with your friends, and be sure to support the roast industry legacy partners, including Marea Coffee and Cape Horn Coffee, as well as Coffee Cycle, Moster Coffee, Leap Coffee, Zumbar Coffee and Tea, Steady State Roasting, Cafe La Terre, and First Light Whiskey. I actually have quite a bit of First Light Whiskey on the road with me right now. You'll find links to all of the show's roast industry legacy partners on the front of roastwestcoast.com or in this episode's show notes wherever you happen to be listening. This episode of the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast was written, produced, and recorded by me, Ryan Wolt. Thanks for bearing with me as I am out of the studio. I hope this show has found you happy, healthy, and with at least enough sanity to make it through the day. And please, always be sure to drink good coffee.